We have many stories from the elders about things like that and what they were for. Did you know, before the darkness took this land and all the world, that the power spread across the entire world that our forefathers lived in? It was an amazing time. Everyone was in union with the power. So much so, they abused it. But it was so easy for them. With a touch of their finger, a light would fill a room. With a simple gesture of their hand, clean, fresh, cold, or hot water was at their disposal. They could control the temperature of a room with power. All this was true before we existed. Would any care to hear a tale of the prophet defeating darkness?
Yes, of course.
I will read to you from the book of the Jackals. The prophet was halted by one of the followers of darkness, a man who was not a man, but only half man, suggesting a number of the people of light as payment. The prophet did not answer until the half man suggested taking only one member of the group, the disciple whom the prophet loved. The prophet of light held out his hand to the half man, who took it, believing it to be a handshake. At the touch of the prophet's hand, the half man's hand began to burn as though held in a fire. The man screamed, but could not release his hand from the prophet's until the hand was burned to ash and fell in pieces to the ground. The prophet said simply, "No." Unable to convince the man of darkness to allow them passage, but under-equipped to instigate war with such a large mass of darkness, the prophet bade his followers to turn about and head back to a place where they could go around the town, leaving the half-man with only one hand. When the prophet of light awoke and stepped out of his shelter, he was shining so brightly that the camp appeared to be in full daylight. Being terrified of the sun and anything that shines brightly as the sun does, the half-men became terrified and blinded and began to scatter. Then he gathered the sick and injured together and began to heal them, using sacred artifacts with the symbol of the power to do so. As he did this, he was teaching certain disciples how to do the same. These disciples would become the first clerics of the power. You should be honored to know that a cleric walks among us this night. He too is trained in healing both body and soul. His name is Italian. All prepared to battle the darkness, readying their minds and arms during the day to repel any attack that may occur in the darkness of night. The night passed without incident, though the prophet appeared troubled, as though he lost a dear friend. With the morning light came a group of children. The children claimed to be a family, though without a family name. The prophet, therefore, called them nameless. You should be honored to know a nameless walks among us. He is now an archon of the Illuminators. Chapter 10. It was during the night, when the moon was new and dark, and the darkness of night was at its fullest, when they came to the abandoned house of the disciples had made camp near. The group was not large, but they had with them beasts to track them. When the prophet of light stood up and shone his light, the half-humans began to fear. But the one with one hand was near and full of rage. He could not touch the prophet, for it burned his skin to approach him. But behind the prophet, inside the house, was the disciple whom the prophet loved.
What is it?
My flashlight! The one that I lost!
That is a testament to the strength of the power.
Praise be to the power. Thank you, Bearcat.
What Illuminators do, man.
The man with one hand grabbed her, and with the help of another half-man, dragged her out of the house and camped into the darkness with the beasts. The screams of the injured and the survivors were joined by the screams of the one taken and the one whom she was taken from. The prophet, crying in agony, collapsed. He prepared in his mind his vengeance. After 3 days, the power granted the prophet help in the form of many scattered followers of light who converged on the camp bearing light and arms. Some of the nameless sent to track the half-men and their beasts also returned that day with knowledge of the location of the disciple whom the prophet loved. They began then to prepare for battle the half-men of darkness. The prophet explained when it was necessary to no longer show mercy to others, when darkness so completely takes over the soul that the soul that was gifted by the power was gone. Without a soul, a human is not whole and is therefore half. When the light of the power goes unheeded and the soul is too corrupt to return, the life must be released from the body. The human shell must die. When the prophet of light and his disciples arrived at the house where the disciple the prophet loved was, she was locked inside a room, because they could see through a window of glass, dimly lit from inside the house as seen from the darkness outside. As the prophet of light entered the house, holding the light of the power high over his head, the half-humans who had taken her fled in fear, and though many were felled by the disciples, many more escaped into the wilderness that they came from with their beasts behind them. Approaching his beloved, the prophet began to cry, for she was near death in a weak condition, very much destroyed inside and outside the body by the half-humans. Thus the prophet showed his beloved mercy by promising to show the half-humans the light or the death of darkness, whichever they would accept, and that the power would hold each responsible by the hands of his prophet. And before the light of the power had extinguished from the prophet's hand, it was used to ignite the house which they were in. As the disciples began to track the half-humans of darkness, all proceeded to a safe distance away from the house, as it was turned into a bright beacon of the light of the honor of the power, fueled by the one the prophet loved. And so, coming with the dawn of a bright sun on a fresh day, the prophet of light and his army of disciples waged war on the darkness dwelling in the buildings. The sentry standing guard began to ask the prophet his business, but was unable to speak when the prophet touched the sentry's mouth, and the half-man's face began to burn with flame. Silently he fell to the ground and continued to burn until he was nothing but a burnt skeleton. The disciples proceeded to ignite the buildings with a conventional fire. The battle of the half-men and their army of beasts lasted much of the day. The prophet knew that if darkness fell before their work was finished, any half-men of darkness who remained would escape. Thus the disciples worked quickly to set fire to each and every building they could, quickly ending the life of any half-human who tried to escape it with the conventional arms. With the beasts gathered outside the town, the fight between the half-humans and the people of the light wore on until nearly nightfall. Before the sun had fully set, however, the last body of darkness that the prophet could sense was discovered, and his soul released from his body into one of the soul jars, as they had now been named. That town was known to the followers of the power as the town of dark blood. The beasts that the half-humans kept appeared to be dogs with a great likeness of jackals. And the prophet of light, his priests and his disciples, took in the jackal dogs, as they too had shown an understanding of life and death by the respect they showed their fallen brethren, and were in fact blessed by the power. And as the prophet and his priests and disciples journeyed through the country accompanied by these jackal dogs, they became known as the Jackals, or as they translated it, the chosen people blessed by the power with the knowledge of the difference between right and wrong. But they were still called the Jackals.
About the Jackals. So what do you guys need for the cell?
We ask only for any of those willing to convert. It is a simple ritual which we've explained. Others have done it today, and they will assure you they remain unharmed. We merely ask for followers to help share the spread of light and goodness and power throughout the lands.
I got my guy who wants to do the ritual. Who wants to convert?
Excellent.
Where are you? Scarecrow. Oh, right here. He wants to convert.
See, the only one? Anyone can convert. It doesn't take any
Kevin?
physical
Where are you?
prowess. Splendid.
You guys seem nice enough. Kevin?
It is...
We'll convert, but we do need that cell.
Right. If you would so kindly pull that out.
feel like the only
All right, who?
have-
Just you? Just
guess.
you alone?
The
No
great
one
thing
else
is,
wants
this
to.
is what you can do. It would be a benefit to you. If I get shot, and it's confirmed that an O'Reilly person shoots me, and you guys bring me back and medicate me, I can blacklist them.
It's true. So,
So now I anoint your head with wax, in the sign of power. And now you are a fellow disciple, a brother, in the light of the power.
gray book, so you can.
That's right. I almost forgot.
You gotta.
We have to keep track, you know, for the Pope. He wants to know who all we're converting. So now we ask. The only thing we ask of you is to, you know, share the light with others, and if you can, convince them to join us as well.